Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 10 of 2020. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the Odds Breakers. And follow us on social media /the Odds Breakers. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag for a 50% sign up bonus. Please visit MyBookie. Use a promo code The Odds Breakers. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and sponsor the podcast and website, please, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com. Click shop. Become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. For $2 more, you can get all that and become a patron subscriber. Get the podcast a little bit early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. All right. College basketball is in the thick of things, and March Madness is around the corner, my friends. Had a kind of a great weekend, 9-2, I believe, since Thursday, and then Tuesday we went 2-2, and Wednesday we went 0-2. It was a very strange Wednesday of college basketball, and lots of upsets happened. There was the Siena. They were up by 12 points at half. That was one of our plays, and I was pretty happy about that. Rutgers was up on Michigan by 3 points, and then I take my daughter to swimming lessons, and obviously get her all settled. Look at my phone, the game's about over, and the bets are completely screwed. And I'm thinking to myself,
unreal.
But that's college basketball, and we still love it. Anyways, we have a great show for you today. Mr. Brian Edwards from BrianEdwardsSports.com and Major Wager is coming on to break down a huge weekend of some college basketball games. Huge games. Kansas, Baylor. We have Maryland, Ohio State coming up. Just some very big games. Can't wait to watch this weekend. We're also going to talk a little bit about football, and we might touch a little bit on the UFC. So I'm very excited to get Brian back on. Like I was saying earlier, it was a crazy Wednesday in college basketball. You had Texas A&M, terrible team in the SEC, beating Alabama at Alabama 74-68, and they were a 11-point dog. All right, 11. That was pretty cool for them, anyway. If not for people that bet Alabama. You had Louisville took care of business. Syracuse, that was one of the normal things that happened. They won by like $30 million. You had VMI beat Western Carolina 74-71 as a 9-point dog. You had Auburn, number 13 Auburn, going into a bad Georgia team, losing by 10 points when Georgia's a 4-point dog. You had Central Florida go to overtime in Cincinnati as an 11.5-point dog and beat them. You had SMU as a 7-point road dog at Tulane lose by 8 points against terrible Tulane. You're seeing like a bunch of resurgence here by some pretty bad teams. So I found that interesting. Let's see here. North Dakota State beat South Dakota. That was kind of normal, actually. Texas, with all their injuries, still blew away TCU at the end, winning by 14 points. Nova went into DePaul and destroyed them by 20. At least they were favored. Like I said, NC State home dog +6 against the Dukies and won by 22 points. That was one play I almost made. Couldn't quite get the 7. I wanted the 7. It went down to 6.5. I couldn't get it quick enough, and then 6. And then I thought to myself that there'd be money coming back on Duke. It never happened. Didn't make the play. And NC State just wins outright. Indiana, as a 5.5-point dog, goes into Minnesota and beats Minnesota outright. See? I mean, this is a crazy Wednesday that we had. Cal, 5.5-point dog at Washington State, beats them outright by 9 points. And then obviously our Rutgers play lost because Michigan went into Rutgers and gave them their first home loss. But there's a reason why Michigan won. And that is because they are
so hot right now.
So hot right now. Michigan's on a little bit of a tear, and Livers didn't even play this game. We had killer line value. We had a 1.5, and Livers didn't play, and the spread closed at about 3.5, and they lost outright. But Michigan's on a nice little 4-game winning streak. They've won 6 of their last 7, only had that Ohio State hiccup at home that I remember so well because it was a game we were on Michigan. And then I don't know what the hell happened there, but either way, Michigan is on a nice little tear, and they've been rewarded in our Big Ten rankings here that we'll go over in a few minutes. But, I got to tell you, some of these teams, they go on some nice upswings, and then obviously they go on some downswings as well, as you saw happen on Wednesday night.
You're ridiculously good looking.
Let's get into our Big Ten power ratings and some shakeups here. Obviously, Maryland now gets the first place nod because Penn State lost. That was one of our better plays on Tuesday. Penn State lost to Illinois at home, so I have to give the nod now to Maryland as the best team in the Big Ten. Penn State is second. Michigan State I have at third, still holding on. Illinois I have fourth. And congrats on that big win, Illinois. Iowa, I have fifth. And Fran McCaffrey's doing just such a great job there. They still can play fast, but they're playing a little bit better defense here down the stretch. I've noticed that with Iowa. And they were, losing to Minnesota. And then they scored 10 unanswered points and beat Minnesota. So good for them. And that was at Minnesota, too. So Iowa did a fantastic job. We have Michigan. Michigan is next. They are upgraded a lot because I had them pretty low. And I'm not so sure Michigan should be put ahead of Illinois, to be honest with you. But Big Ten's pretty bunched up right now. I have Ohio State next. Ohio State's on a little bit of a nice little run themselves, winning 5 of their last 6 games. They dropped that game 3 games ago at Wisconsin. Next, I have Minnesota, and then I have Wisconsin after that. And Wisconsin's a great home team, bad road team. Rutgers, I had to downgrade below Wisconsin for their recent play. It's just not been good enough. Purdue is after Rutgers. Purdue's another team that's been playing poorly. They're back on their downswing. Not so hot right now. Indiana beaten Minnesota recently and is still holding on to 12th position. Nebraska at 13th, and Northwestern at 14th. I expect one more surge from this Nebraska and Northwestern team to try to get a W, and then I kind of expect them to give up the next weekend, or possibly even the weekend after that. The last game in the Big Ten is the weekend of March 7th, March 8th, so I'm not going to be so excited to be betting on those dogs due to motivation issues that could happen after this weekend. One thing I also wanted to mention is that a lot of those trendy contrarian bets, I'm not sure if we shouldn't be fading those as well. And I was guilty of being on Marquette. That was one of our free plays in our Tuesday 2-pack and the over. And they're kind of the trendy contrarian because Creighton was on a run and they're going to Marquette. Marquette is a huge spot. And, the money came on Marquette and the money came in on the over. And what happens? Creighton's defense is actually a lot better than what all the statistics say. And that's something I made a mistake on. I missed that. I should have saw through some of the numbers they were given Creighton for their defensive efficiencies. Way too low. Creighton has been on an absolute tear, winning 9 of their last 10 games, beating teams at Villanova, at Seton Hall, DePaul, Xavier, Providence. I mean, their defense is better than what's shown, and I should have noticed that. That's one thing that I messed up on, and something I can get better on is starting to really look into why they're on a winning streak and not necessarily, bet the trendy contrarian pick like Marquette. But had I known that Marcus Howard was going to be scoreless the whole first half, he came in with his giant face mask on, then I wouldn't have not just bet the over and Marquette, I probably would have bet the under. So, that's how poorly Marcus Howard played, but he also was stuck because Creighton stuck him. A couple more of those trendy contrarian bets that didn't work out was Oklahoma. I wanted to bet Oklahoma, but I didn't. I didn't get my number. It closed at +3 at home against Baylor, and Baylor ends up beating them by 10 points or so. VCU against Dayton. We did bet Dayton as a premium play, but the VCU side was a contrarian play. The VCU was closed at 2.5 favorite at VCU, and I'm against Dayton? I'm not sure if they even belong in the same gym. So I actually took Dayton there. It was one play there was right there on Tuesday. LSU was another contrarian play against Kentucky, and Kentucky went into LSU and whooped their ass. So had a lot of that. The dogs were barking on Wednesday. Some of the favorites were going on Tuesday, obviously. Well, Creighton was a dog, but it was pretty close to a pick 'em. But like I said, always keep in mind for motivation, because motivation is key here in these situations in this time of year. Some of these bubble teams are going to really turn it up this weekend. And the following weekend, you should have some teams really giving up and not caring and just getting ready for their conference tournaments, and hopefully they can, get a spark there. So remember that. Obviously, you have any questions or any games that you'd like me to give a lean or a side on, tweet us at the Oddsbreakers. Feel free to do that. I would love to try to help out or give you my side. Maybe it'd be something that could take you over to make a bet, or maybe take you off of making a bet if you're questioning something. So always happy to do that. And if you have any other questions about handicapping basketball, please feel free to ask us through the website, or feel free to do it via Twitter as well. Without further ado, let's bring in our guest to talk about some huge games, Mr. Brian Edwards. And now I'm very excited to welcome back a longtime contributor to the Oddsbreakers. You've heard him on many radio shows all over the nation. You can find some of his work on Vegas Insider and MajorWager.com. I'm happy to welcome back Mr. Brian Edwards from Brian Edwards Sports. You can follow him at Vegas B. Edwards. Brian, the last time we talked, you were telling everyone how LSU was going to win the world championship for college football, my man. How are things going?
Good. That went well.
Oh, it sure did. You were on them early too, if I remember.
Yeah. I decided pretty much before I was in Vegas that weekend when they beat Mississippi State. I was decided right then I was leaning toward them to win at Alabama, and then Tua got hurt that night, and then I knew LSU was going to win at Alabama. And then when we got to Atlanta for the SEC championship, Georgia's wide receiver Pickens had gotten ejected and was out for the first half, and who was the other receiver? Lawrence Cager was out with an injury, and I knew I thought the three. I didn't have a very good football season, but I thought the three easiest bets of the year were LSU against Georgia, Oklahoma, and Clemson, and I put my cash behind it and didn't lose as much this season thanks to those games.
Heck yeah, man! What a great one. I had LSU minus the 5.5 too, so I was pretty happy with the finish. It was fantastic, my man. And here you're having a hell of an NBA season, aren't you?
I am. I was just kind of around 500 starting of 2020, and then from January 2nd up until the 13th, I went 16-1, and that ever since then I've stayed above 60%. I went into the All-Star break with a 66-41 record, 61.7%, and if your plays are 100 each, you'd be up 2,074 or plus 20.74 units. Haven't been as good in college, unfortunately, but yeah, having a heck of an NBA year.
Yeah, man. Well, that's awesome. College has been difficult for lots of the sharpest handicappers out there. We're kind of treading water here, holding on. But it's been difficult. I think this weekend's going to be a much bigger weekend and a much more profitable weekend personally. But if any of you listeners out there want to make some money on the NBA, check out Brian Edwards there at his website, brianedwardsports.com. You definitely are trailblazing the way in the NBA, my man. So congratulations on that. Let's talk.
Appreciate that, and thanks for having me, man.
Nope. No problem, man. We love hearing from you, Brian, and I appreciate the time you put into it because I know how busy you are. But you love talking sports and the same sports I think that I like, and I wanted to talk a little bit about one sport that we have in common, and that's the UFC. A little controversial for some of the more educated UFC viewers in that UFC 247 here, and I'll tell you my take before I ask you a little bit about it. Awesome show though. Shevchenko was amazing. You gotta love her tactical ability. She's just amazing. But the question was should John Jones have beat Dominic Reyes, right? And he got scored a little bit because of his takedowns. But then you have me who bet Latifi to go the 3-round distance plus 400 I got and win against Lewis. I thought that thing was for sure because Latifi had the takedowns, the same reasoning that they used to give the title, the bout back to John Jones. And they gave it to Derek Lewis, and I was shocked there. And then they did the opposite and gave it to John Jones. I didn't see a lot of consistency there, my man. What are your thoughts on how this thing went down in Houston?
I don't think that the UFC should ever have a show with title fights in the state of Texas again. Basically, what you have is a commission that is using boxing judges to score MMA. And it even got even more controversial. Obviously, there's tons of controversy with Reyes, Jones, and Latifi and the Black Beast. But there was also controversy with the James Krause fight. And Krause took the fight on 24 hours notice when the guy had the guy had a weight cut issue and had to go to the hospital, and it was deemed he couldn't fight. And Krause was there to corner one of his fighters. He took the fight in 24 hours notice. He's on a 6-fight winning streak in the welterweight division. He goes up to middleweight on 24 hours notice, and he had back control for like 4 minutes and was working on a rear naked choke on Giles, his opponent. And it ended up that the one guy that gave Jones 4 rounds to 1, that same judge gave round 1 to Giles, even though Giles was defending a rear naked choke 4 minutes out of the 5 minutes of the round, which was, was insane. And so it comes out yesterday that judge was given his black belt 10 years ago by the guy that was cornering Giles. So that is obviously a conflict of interest, and that is a shame, and that should never, ever happen. I'd be fine if the UFC – I mean, I know they have too many fans. It's too big of a state to not go back to Texas. Of course they're going to go back there, but they should never have a title fight there again, and they shouldn't do any big event at Cowboy Stadium like they've talked about for McGregor or something in the past, because that commission doesn't know what the hell they're doing when it comes to MMA.
My God. I mean, can you appeal that decision? I mean,
I'm sure he's going to take Krause will do whatever, I'm sure he's looking into it.
No doubt. And he took the high road, I believe, after that fight too. And so good for him. And I remember that fight too. I think it was might have been the last fight of the undercard, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was the last one on whatever, ESPN2 or ESPN proper.
ESPN Plus. Yeah. So I remember watching that too. And, we were pretty surprised how well he did on such a short notice. And I kind of was rubbing my head too, wondering how the heck did, he ended up losing that fight. But, same thing with, the Latifi fight, Latifi. So he takes him down a couple times and he plays a little defense. And just because he wasn't the aggressor at the end, they took it away from him. And then obviously in the main event, the same thing that Reyes, he's played a little defense at the end just because he knows he won the fight. He clearly won the first 3 rounds, and then they gave it to John Jones anyway. It's like Reyes would have fought differently the last round had he knew that crap would have happened completely differently. So it just blows my mind how that happened. You're right. You're absolutely right. Those judges can't come back. And then they're going to have to fix that. And I think hopefully Dana White got the message there, because there's been some controversy about that. I did at least hit Tafa at 6-1 knockout in the first, so that helped.
Oh, nice.
That helped. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. I knew the fight was going to be fast, and I just kind of was like, well, I'll pick my side. I'll pick the bigger plus money there, I think, on Tafa, and I kind of like what I saw from him, and that worked out. So thank goodness for that one.
I had the prop for it to end in round 1, but it was not a 6-1 payout. I wish I'd have gone your route.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this, man. I'm excited for the UFC coming up. We have 248 here, and we have a little event this weekend that you might have a play on, don't you?
Yeah, we do. They're over in New Zealand, which is home turf for Dan Hooker, and Paul Felder is number 6 in the lightweight division. Hooker's number 7. So this is a huge fight for both guys. The winner of this is going to get a top 5 guy and could potentially, if they beat the top 5 guy in their next fight, be right there in the mix for a title shot. So, and at age 34 for Felder, that makes it, even more monumental of a scrap for him on Saturday. He's on the road. He's a plus, most books are plus 125, but I see 5 Dimes has a plus 130, and I like Felder. Both these guys are on a roll. Hooker is 6-1 in his last 7. Felder's 5-1 in his last 6, but the only loss was when he took short notice with Mike Perry. He went up a weight class to welterweight. He broke his arm in round 2, and he still lost by split decision. I like Felder. Although I got nothing bad to say about Hooker by any means. I think it'll be a war, huge fight for that division and for both men but I like Felder plus 130.
All right, well, there you go. UFC Fight Night 168 coming up on February 22nd. We're looking at Felder for that match. Thank you very much for that. Well, before we get into some college basketball this weekend, and we know there's some huge games here, I'd be hard-pressed not to talk a little bit about that sweet little Florida Gator schedule for football coming up here. And the reason I say sweet, I already looked at some future bets here, nice and early. They're out on 5 dimes, and they only give you the championship ones. But, Florida's one that you might think about. And they were 17-1. I didn't love them at 17-1, but I can see why they're 17-1 because you guys avoid Alabama. You get an LSU team that returns only 10% of their offense. You get them at home. You avoid Texas A&M. You got Kentucky at home. The Georgia game is always on the neutral field, and the semis are going to be down again this coming year, in my opinion. Oh my God, this thing is set up sweet for you guys, in my opinion. What are your thoughts about that?
It is. I can't disagree with any of that. We've got 3 garbage non-conference games, and at FSU will not be a problem. Road SEC games at Ole Miss and at Vandy shouldn't be a problem. Outside of LSU and Georgia, I guess at Tennessee is going to be the third toughest game, and even if Tennessee's a little better, by the way, look, that winning streak, and I guess, technically this is an accurate statement. They have the second longest current winning streak in FBS, but their schedule is always backloaded easily. Like, in other words, they always get Kentucky and Vanderbilt and Missouri and a non-conference game in November. And so they, even when they're bad, usually win most of their November games. So I'm not like, people are talking about, here comes Tennessee, watch out. Yeah, I'm not really buying that.
I'm not into that either. And I think that Georgia game is going to tell you which one's going to be playing for the SEC championship. But you get to return your quarterback. I don't think Georgia does, right?
No, they got Jamie Newman, the grad transfer from Wake Forest, as Fromm turned pro.
Right, exactly. So, and he was pretty good at Wake Forest, but I don't think he's going to be elite. I think there's going to be some weakness there, and some of Kirby Smart's antics have been, plenty of film on him, and they had a terrible finish last year. They still had some great recruiting there, but I like Mullen for sure, and you guys have some good return in production for a Florida team, and they're the team. Georgia, they have to play Alabama this year, I believe. They get Bama. So that could be a ding if they lose that game too. And I'm pretty sure that Georgia plays Auburn. Okay, so there's your advantage right there. Those 2 games, in my opinion. So I'm real excited for that. I'm already checking out the college football seasons, doing all my research as well. It's nice to get it done a little bit early, and hopefully I'll have some more plays for some of our listeners as well, Brian. But yeah, I'm excited for your Gators, man. I hope those odds come out sweet enough for me to take it for at least the SEC. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and DraftKings has odds to win the SEC, and last time I looked, I think Florida is either 7 or 8 to 1 to win the SEC.
That's not bad. That's not bad. Yeah. I think that's probably takeable for me because it's the Georgia game, I know, and people could say, well, you can do, just bet that game and then bet the LSU game and not do that. No, I like 8 to 1. That's not too bad of a play. And if you're feeling really bad about it later, you could, maybe hedge it a little bit, the Georgia game, and take Georgia on the money line. But no, that's not bad at all. So it looks like there's already some good odds out there. I didn't know that DraftKings would be so quick for that. So very congrats to them for throwing out some odds there, my man.
Yeah. DraftKings got all kind of good stuff. I've become a new peruser of their website, if you will, checking out all kind of odds. They got all kind of props and stuff for all sports.
Well, hell yeah, my man. But we have a big weekend coming up. Lots of big games here to talk about. We got North Carolina versus Louisville, Michigan versus Purdue, Florida versus Kentucky, Oregon versus Arizona, huge in the Pac-12 there. Gonzaga versus BYU, that's huge in the West Coast Conference. And Kansas versus Baylor. I'm going to save that one for last, Brian, but you listeners, that game is early. That's going to be a noon Eastern kickoff, but I saved the best for last, my man. Let's get into North Carolina versus Louisville is going to be, I think they're going to be laying 11 points here. Total is going to be around 146, and that's what we can do is just predict the spreads the best we can. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, Louisville righted the ship last night and blasted the Cuse at home after the two bad losses on the road last week. They lose at Georgia Tech, and then they get spanked by 15 at Clemson. But those were on the road, and they 90-66 over the Cuse last night, when the Cuse just had a 3-point lead on FSU with like 2-3 minutes left, and only lost by 3 in Tallahassee, where FSU's undefeated this year. So that was a strong performance by Louisville. Obviously, North Carolina, one of their worst teams in more than a decade, and have really lost some hard breakers, particularly here of late. So, I would think, I'm thinking a little, I would have probably said 11 before last night's result, but after Louisville spanked Syracuse, I'm thinking probably 13.5 to 14 on that number. If it were 11, I might be interested in Louisville. Interested in Louisville.
Yeah. Okay. And so, in that, I wrote it 11 before this game too. You're right. They
exactly.
Spanked Syracuse.
Like 2 days ago.
Yeah. And I almost took Louisville, and I was like, is this the game they get out of their little funk? And it was. It was. I almost kind of wish they lost it, and I would have been able to play on Louisville here. The question for me on this game is is North Carolina going to be motivated? They're 10-16. They're completely done. Hell, I don't even know if they can make the freaking NIT tournament, man.
No, they're 10-16. Maybe the CBI would invite them, but I don't know if they would take that invite.
I don't know if they would either, and they should. They should do it for next
West
year.
Virginia took that invite last year when West Virginia was below 500.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever seen. I don't want to say Power 5, that's football, but a high major. I don't think I'd ever seen one in the CBI tourney last year, but West Virginia was. So maybe North Carolina would take that bid. I don't know.
Yeah, there was somebody that did turn down the NIT, and I can't remember who it was. It was a pretty decent size.
Oh, I think it was Alabama with Avery Johnson last year. I think they turned down the NIT last year.
I think you're right. And I think there might have been another. So there you go. Yeah, I think some teams do it. I think the more time
we're making coaching changes.
That's a difference. If you're going to keep the same coach, you better play. It's more time. That's what teams love about going to bowl games. They get 2-3 extra weeks of practice, and so coaches love that. And I think it'd be stupid for them to turn it down. It's more like this is what your punishment is, in my opinion, to get out there and try to win this and prepare for next year is the way I would say it. But I think North Carolina is a little bit better than their power ratings mostly, and what Ken Pom shows and Torvik shows. Just because Anthony, I think him coming back makes them more of a top 60 team, rather than a top 95 team. So that's what concerns me a little bit about when you say 13 or 14. I think this could be a good live betting situation, and that's what I wrote down because I don't really have a side. I think that if you look at the way North Carolina comes out and plays their defense for the first 2 minutes of that game, if they're just like a wall, they're not letting anything go. They're hacking, they're jumping, they look fired up on defense. That's when maybe North Carolina could be the side if you're getting that high spread. But if it looks like Louisville's scoring in the beginning, you're going to be able to get -12, -13, -14, whatever it is, live betting. That might be the way to go. So, any last thoughts?
Yeah, well, another thing to watch on that one, is Brandon Robinson, who's been out a couple weeks. I don't think he's going to be ready to go by Saturday, but, if he were able to come back, that would be a lift for them. And look, when I point this out, it could work both ways. It could kind of point out that they're better than their record indicates, or it could point out that, how much do they have left emotionally? They have to be so drained. Okay, last game, lose by 1 at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Game before that, lose by 2 to Virginia. 2 games before that, Trey Jones just had to make that. I've never seen a better missed free throw on purpose. And then they have to have 2 buzzer beaters to beat you in OT. And then the game before that, I had them +9 in Tallahassee. I don't think FSU got ahead of the number the whole game. They lose by 6 at FSU. The game before that, they lost by 1 to Boston College. A couple games before that, they lose in double overtime at Virginia Tech. 2 games before that, they lose at home to Clemson. The first time they'd lost at home to Clemson in 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've just had heartbreaker after heartbreaker.
Totally. And I believe Robinson is back because he did play a few minutes. I think he played 20 minutes or something against Notre Dame here. I'm just trying to pull it up. 25 minutes he played. So 3 for 6 from 3. He played.
Oh, you're right. My mistake. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I saw it on the injury report that must not have had updated. My fault. I'm just looking at the box score. You're right. My bad.
But just like you said, does that mean they're going to, after all those heartbreaking close losses, are they going to give that effort? I could see them possibly shutting it down if Louisville kind of jumps them and they're not playing some tight D. So, that's when you possibly get a blowout. So live betting is, in my opinion, is probably the way to go. Well, let's move on to a Big Ten game here. We have Michigan Wolverines versus the Purdue Boilermakers, and I got Purdue laying about -2. The total in this game is about 133, 134, and I'll start with this one, my man, if that's okay. Michigan's so hot right now. They cost me a little bit against Rutgers. I talked a little bit about that earlier. And Purdue is definitely not. They had their little swing where they were kicking butt, and then now they're kind of coming back to normal. Livers didn't even play against Rutgers, and they still won that game. But I'm not sure if he's going to play this game either. Purdue, they lost the 3 games in a row: the Penn State, Ohio State, and they lost to Wisconsin. They're just such a different team on the road for the most part. But at the same time, after saying that, I think this is one of those buy low, sell high games, in my opinion. I think the Boilermakers, they're not the best shooting team on the road. They shoot 37% on the road, but they shoot 48% at home. 48. That's just Jekyll and Hyde right there. The Wolverines stepped it up. They've been shooting about 46% on the road. These teams played this year. I remember it. I got screwed on the under because it went into double overtime, and that happened in Ann Arbor. But Purdue had them, and they kind of choked it away, and this is a huge spot for Purdue. It's so huge because Purdue is the most bubbly of the bubble teams being discussed right now. They need this win more than Michigan. One thing I like about Purdue is that they're better at offensive rebounding. 34.7% offensive rebounding to Michigan's 26%. So if they can get a few extra possessions there, being that they're about equal in 3-point shots, I think this is Purdue's game to win. One little stat I found, Purdue 54-27-2 against the spread at home since 2014. They have one of those best. 67%, man. One of the best at-home ATS records.
Say that. Let me write that down. What's that number again? 52-27?
54-27-2. And you can find that on Killer Sports, my man. And I'll tell you, that is one hell of a trend. And I didn't even know it was that big this year. And it's do or die for them. Because their last 2 home games are against Indiana and Rutgers, and they're not going to get nearly the cred to beat Indiana and Rutgers as they will to beat Michigan. So they got to get in the tournament here. They have to win this game. I got Purdue -2, 2.5 points, 2.5 stars. I'm putting on this baby out of 5. What are your thoughts on it?
I agree with you on the spread. I wrote down Purdue -2. They've been really solid at home this year, 10-3 straight up, and some real, giving out some big-time pimp slaps to Michigan State, number 11 in Ken Palm, 71-42. Beat the brakes off Wisconsin on a Friday night by 19. Beat Iowa 104-68 at home. So they've beaten 5 top 50 Ken Palm teams at home. Michigan, they're in good form right now. Winners of 4 in a row and 6 of their last 7, both straight up and against the spread. We don't know about Livers. Their leading scorer, 13.3 points per game, is going to be questionable. Purdue's got an extra day of rest and preparation, having lost to your boys in a push. I had your boys -4 against them the other night, and it pushed. And then, Rutgers, Michigan had to travel to Rutgers. Now it's a back-to-back road game. And Michigan was 2-5, both straight up and against the spread in 7 road assignments until that big win at the RAC last night. And the 2 other wins had been against Nebraska and Northwestern, but they finally get a breakthrough road win. Perhaps that leaves them a little satisfied here. This is a tough call for me. Gun to my head, I would probably lean to Purdue at -2 or fewer, but it's probably one I'm going to pass on just because I think Michigan's in a little better form right now. However, they're on the road where, Purdue plays really good at Mackey Arena.
Yeah, and I get that. And I'll tell you this, with Michigan playing so good, down the stretch here is definitely a little bit scary, but they have a new coach, Juwan Howard, and I just don't know. I can't put that kind of trust in him to keep it up, so I have to play this. It's just one of those spots that I really kick. Sometimes when you make a play, you do it just because you're going to kick yourself when you see that play win a lot harder than normal. This was one of those spots for me. I have to play Purdue, and I think that they're the right side. I feel pretty strong about it, so I'm going to go with it, my man. Let's move into a game that you know quite well. In SEC country, we have the Florida Gators facing the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky's going to be laying about 5 points, over under about 139. And I got to tell you, man, both of these teams are looking pretty good lately. Kentucky looking real good, blowing out LSU at LSU. Kentucky has been on that hell of a streak. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, Ashton Hagen has got a thigh contusion from the LSU game back in my prime. We called it a Charlie horse. I think he'll play though. I can't imagine Charlie horse from Tuesday night keeping somebody out of a Saturday game, but he might be moving a little gingerly, and if so, Andrew Nembhard could probably take advantage of that at both ends. Florida's schedule kind of eased up a little bit here late, or a lot of it. They've had, twice against Vandy and Texas A&M as well, and then they got to face Arkansas without Isaiah Joe. SEC's been really strange. You've got LSU, who was with Auburn and Kentucky tied at the top of the conference with 9-2 SEC records last week, and all of a sudden LSU's lost 4 or 5. Auburn's dropped back-to-back, could only score 55 on Georgia, one of the worst defensive teams in the country, last night. Now, Auburn was missing Okoro, but I think Kentucky will probably be, and you know what, I'm forgetting what you wrote down. I'm thinking 7-ish for Kentucky, and it would have to be a good bit off from that number either way for me to have an interest in either one. Now, Florida, we're getting 9 or more. I'd probably be interested in that. And if Kentucky were laying 5 or fewer, which I doubt they will be, maybe I'd be interested in them. I'm thinking 7-ish there. Florida's won 3 in a row. Kerry Blackshear should be fresh. He got 4 charges the other night, so he only played 12 minutes against Arkansas the other night.
Holy cow.
So he'll be, that's Florida's workhorse, and so he should be very fresh for whatever that's worth.
That's worth a lot because he's kind of their key big man down there. And Nick Richards, by the way, limped off and came back into that game, but he has an ankle sprain, so he's beat up a little bit for Kentucky too. And I think the play would have to consider that those guys would be healthy. Ken Pom has this at 4, and that's what Vegas really copies. I wrote the spread at 5. Bart Torvik has it at 4. So
really,
yeah. So
that seems really small to me.
It does. It does seem small to me. And at that number, 5, 4, whatever, I think I have to play Kentucky.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think their loss to Auburn was due to some extenuating zebra-type circumstances, in my opinion. And I think they're still getting hit for that. I don't know. That I watched that game, and I was on Kentucky, and I could not believe. I thought I was watching Duke for a second. But Kentucky they let down against the small teams for some reason. They do not take – and it's just been forever since John Calipari's been there. The teams like the Evansvilles, South Carolina, right? And then they get up for the big teams. They beat the Michigan States. They beat Texas Tech. In Texas Tech, they beat LSU. They beat them well. Florida, on the other hand, I'm not loving what they do on the road. I like them at home. They did have that nasty Baylor loss at home that pretty much screwed up everybody all over the United States. But usually they're good at home. But they're only 3-5 against the spread on the road, and I'm not sure if they're as good as their record shows with Florida. And I don't know if they're in the tournament yet either. But their best win overall was against a very lucky Auburn team. If you look on Ken Pom, they ranked number 2 in luck because of all those comebacks that they had. For the teams, for the way they perform against the actual offensive and defensive efficiencies, the fact that they won those games, Ken Pom gives a judge on luck on that with comparing those variables. And Auburn's number 2 out of 353 teams. So,
5 of their wins are in overtime. So, yeah, if you're going to call anybody lucky out there this year, Auburn fits the bill.
For sure. But I'm trying to look at Florida's best true road win, and it was against South Carolina back in January 7th. And, South Carolina's only really number 73. I think Florida should – I think Kentucky should be higher up for where people are ranking them. I personally think they're a top 15, top 14 team. You look on Ken Pom,
I do too.
Ken Pom has them like 29. I disagree with Ken Pom 100% there. And Florida's got a pretty good stat line, but they're a little bit weak on defense compared to normal Gator teams of the past, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And so I look at how tall they are, and they got Blackshear, who's 6'10", but the only other starter that's over 6'5". Well, that's the only guy over 6'5" is Blackshear, is what I'm trying to say. Kentucky's got Montgomery and Nick Richards down low. So I think that Florida is going to come back down to earth this game. And I think Kentucky really wants to show that they're contenders. So I like Kentucky at the -5 here. Pretty big play, 3-star. Any final thoughts?
Well, I'll just say that with Auburn's loss last night, Florida moved up ahead of them, and they're now ahead of LSU at Ken Pom at number 32. So that's the second best SEC ranking on Ken Pom. And also with 2 games left against Kentucky, Florida actually controls its own destiny. If it wins out and gives Kentucky broom treatment, they would win the SEC regular season title. Not that means a whole lot, but they're in a good situation that if they can finish strong, and look, it would be no shame losing at Rupp, but Florida doesn't need to be getting blown out like they were blown out at Ole Miss and at Missouri. They need to play well and stay in. They're deep. They're not in great form right now, but they're pretty decent form. They've been wildly inconsistent, as you would expect from a team that basically plays nothing but freshmen and sophomores outside of Blackshear.
Exactly. All right, 100%. And it's really stopping Blackshear down low. So we'll see if that's possible. Blackshear might have a great game too. He's going to look at this as a key game for him. So this is going to be a great game to watch. Is what I'm well, I definitely want to tune into that one. It'll be on one of the TVs, Brian. It'll be on one of them, my man. Let's talk about the Pac-12 a little bit. And I haven't gotten too dirty with the Pac-12 this year, but this game is big. You got Oregon versus Arizona. Arizona's going to be laying about -5. The total on this game is 143. The thing is, these teams are playing tonight and we're recording Thursday afternoon here. So obviously a lot's going to depend upon what happens, but hell, Oregon State looks like a little bit of a nice dog against Arizona there, but I haven't touched that one yet, but it's going to depend upon that. I think this decides the Pac-12 regular season, being that Colorado has 3 road games to finish off and they all have like 4 losses-ish. I think this is the one that's going to decide the regular season. I took Oregon at +250 before the season started to win the Pac-12, and I'm thinking now I might be wrong on that. What's interesting to me, both of these teams are inconsistent this year. You had Arizona losing at home to UCLA like a week and a half ago. What the hell was that?
Right.
And then Oregon had a couple stinkers losing to Stanford and things like that. Like, what the hell? One thing I'm looking at is their home road splits. Oregon shoots 51% at home, but only 42% on the road. And Arizona shoots a 47.8% at home. So if there's anything to key on for this, it's that. Arizona lost in overtime when they played Oregon earlier this year, and that was at Oregon. So I kind of think Arizona is going to be up for this one. Both teams play faster than their tempo. If you look at kind of their seconds per possession here, Arizona, their tempo shows about ranking 143 at 69.3 possessions per game, but their average possession length is only 16.4, which ranks 56th. And I think that it's going to make them play a little bit faster. Oregon's normally a slower playing team, but their possessions shows that they're a little bit faster than that as well. So I'm going to look at the over. I hope it gets bet down because whenever a total comes out, it seems to get hammered down. But if it gets down low enough, I might take it. And would think 143 would be my firing spot here. I also like Arizona at -5 a little bit. I have Arizona winning 79-72. So going to be a great game to watch. Have you got a chance to look at this one?
Yeah, and got to watch Oregon. I love Sunday nights when there are not many games, and I can watch a whole game. I watched Oregon Utah. And had some in-game hedges and whatnot going on. I love that freshman point guard for Utah, and I certainly love both point guards in this game. Mannion for Arizona and Peyton Pritchard for Oregon. What a great matchup that'll be in the backcourt. I would lean to Oregon to win. I don't know that I would want to lay 5 if that is the number, but I'll just point out the over 16-9 overall for Oregon. The under, however, is 14-11 for Arizona. But again, Arizona with the revenge factor at home, I would lean to them, but I don't know that I would want to lay 5.
Yeah, and this is, like I said, such a huge game for both teams because I think it's going to give that team control over the Pac-12 here, and it's the second road game for Oregon. They're going to play ASU first. I'm guessing they're staying in Arizona.
And the ASU is a big game tonight too. So
yeah.
Whereas Oregon State at home, maybe not. I mean, I know we've got a double-digit spread, and the Beavers could be live tonight, but we're catching the big number. But a bigger game for Oregon tonight, and a second road game in 3 days. That's just another slight advantage Arizona's way.
Yeah, I might make a late play on the Beavers if that number stays around 11, 12. We'll see where it comes out here. Let's move on to the West Coast Conference and stay on the West Coast, I should have said. We have Gonzaga versus BYU, and it's at BYU. And I've been waiting for this game, my man. I really have. BYU is a damn good team this year, if anyone's been watching. And they're without their best player for about half the season. He had to sit out for about, I think it was 10 games
because of some sort of transfer no, it wasn't transfer. It was like
it was a suspension of some sort. I forget why, but
Childs. And then he was
remember.
Exactly. And then he was hurt in the middle of the season, missed the game against St. Mary's where they lost in overtime, missed the Portland game, missed the San Diego game, missed the Gonzaga game, and that's where they got blown out at Gonzaga 92-69. But this is the game that they need to get some respect. I don't know. I think they're in the tournament, but at the same time, they're only, quadrant one win, I think, is Houston. I don't think Utah State is a quadrant one win, and I guess St. Mary's, Houston, St. Mary's. I think they're in, but this is a statement game for BYU here. This is what they've been waiting for all year, and BYU is the number one 3-point shooting team in the nation. They 42.3% adjusted, and being at home, that really helps them here. They can play fast, they can play slow. Their only weakness is, I guess, the offensive boards. But Gonzaga, I don't know if Tilly's going to be back, and they're just kind of due for a spot that they lose a game. I don't know. It's hard to quantify that. It's not like you handicap that itself, but I just think it's a bigger spot for BYU than it is for Gonzaga here. Complete home run spot. And I don't think Gonzaga defends the three that well. They only rank 96th in an opponent 3-point percent. So in the West Coast Conference, if you're only ranking 96th in defending the three, that's a problem. That means you play a good team that could be a lot worse. So Childs is a beast. I think I'm going to play BYU here. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with your sentiment that BYU's a really good team, and I think they're comfortably in the tournament right now. I mean, they're 21-7, but 3 of their losses were in overtime. 4 of their losses were when Childs was out, and going back decades, the committee has always said that they take into account if you have a key player who misses a couple of games and you lose, and that key player is ready to go and is healthy and has been healthy for a couple of weeks going into the tournament, they've always said that they take that into account. And so if so, a loss to Kansas should not be shameful. A overtime loss at Boise State should not be shameful. A 5-point loss at home to San Diego State, who's still unbeaten, shouldn't be shameful. And an overtime loss at Utah. I mean, we're talking overtime games at Boise and Utah, and then Kansas number 1 in Ken Palm, San Diego State number 4 in Ken Palm, and then you also lose in overtime against St. Mary's when he was out. Their only bad loss, and at least it's a Ken Palm top 100. Or I'm sorry, Utah is 116 outside of the top 100 in Ken Palm, but San Fran is 88 in Ken Palm, and that was a 1-point loss. So, I mean, 3 overtime losses, 4 of your 7 losses without your best player, with 1 loss by 1 at San Fran. They bring a 6-game winning streak into this one. And by the way, I don't know when you get this up, but they're in total look-ahead mode tonight.
Against Santa Clara. Yeah. So this could be a 7-game win streak if they take care of business. I mean, it's a 15-point spread, and I really considered Santa Clara there, but Santa Clara has just been so bad. And I think the train of BYU is a little bit stronger. I'll tell you right now, I took a little bit on plus 18 on the Dons on San Francisco against Gonzaga, but I'm not so sure that BYU doesn't want to beat the hell out of these guys. So yeah, but they're a live dog. There's no way I can bet BYU against Santa Clara. Hell no.
Yeah, and I mean, the BYU fans are incredible. In 2011 at the Sweet 16, now granted it was Jimmer's senior year, and Jimmer is probably the biggest star at BYU since Danny Ainge, but they probably brought at least 10,000 people to New Orleans, if not 12 or 13. I mean, it was a complete road game in a Sweet 16 tourney game. It was a complete road game in terms of the fans and the crowd. So I mean, I think they packed more than 20,000 into that place. It's going to be rocking and rolling. But with that said, I tell you, man, the way Gonzaga just absolutely boat raced St. Mary's on the road by 30 and hung a 90-burger on them a couple of Saturday nights ago, that has me really concerned about going against the Zags. But I don't think Gonzaga will be double digits, but they would almost need to be for me to play BYU. I'm not looking to go against BYU at home by any means. I'm thinking Gonzaga is going to be about 6 or 7. We'll see. I'm sorry. What did you say you thought the line was?
Well, KenPom has 2.
It's going to be more than 2.
Yeah, I think so too. I wouldn't want to bet it at 2. It's got to be above 3 for me, for my firing point. But let's look at what Torvik's got. He's usually pretty good about this stuff, and he's got it 2.6. So
really, well,
but the public's the books don't want to get cornered against Gonzaga, right? So they're going to probably put it out at 3, 3.5, and it'll get bet to 5. Maybe is that sound fair? Does that make sense?
Maybe. I think they would get clobbered with Gonzaga action if they threw out anything 4 or fewer. I would think, but I'm not as dialed in to the WCC, so maybe I'm a little off here. I just know what I watched. I mean, what did Gonzaga make at St. Mary's? Like 15 of their first 16 shots? I mean, it was game, set, match at the first TV timeout.
Yep, it was. But Gonzaga was probably also remembering that they got beat by St. Mary's in the West Coast tournament last year, too. So they came out ready that game, there's
nobody in America that would have beaten Gonzaga that night on any bench.
No, there won't be. Nope, I agree. Nobody would have beat Gonzaga like that, and they have the team to do that. But you wonder how many times they can do that, and if they get a little slow, BYU can do that too with that 42% 3-point shooting. So it's going to be a smaller play for me, but. I understand if you pass. I don't love it at 2. I had to write it at 2s because that's where I'm thinking that the sharp side, the pinnacle might open it, but I don't know if I don't know how much I want to put on it at 2. I'll just say, let's just say this. I'm going to say 3 or better is what I'm going to say for BYU. So we'll see what happens. All right. Well, let's get on to the biggest game of the weekend here. Kansas versus Baylor. Baylor -2. The total in this game is 127. A lot of people always pick their little spots to fade Baylor. All the sharp bettors, the pick sellers, even a lot of the public try to fade them again against Oklahoma. That spread went down from 4 to 3 really quick. It sat at 3. And what happens? Baylor just proved everybody wrong again. He's go on and just beat their butts. But this game is larger than huge, in my opinion, because it's not only for just the share of the Big 12 regular season. Kansas can get the share if they win this, but and Baylor obviously will take it if they win it. But this is going to dictate the best chance at the number 1 overall seed, I think. Yeah, I think that's what this is about. And the loser of this game could fall into the 2 seed. So that's why I think that this is such a huge game, not just the 1 versus 3 or whatever the hell they're ranked. I look on KenPom. I don't really pay attention to the AP.
I had no idea what the AP rankings look like ever in basketball. Ever.
Exactly.
I don't think I've ever looked at it. Not in a decade.
I only look at it if I think I'm going to fade one of them, but that's usually in the 15 to 25 range. But yeah, Kansas hasn't lost since they played Baylor, and that was on January 11th. And I thought they were going to win that game. I was at Chuck E. Cheese with the kids, and I was like, what, they have all these TVs going, which makes it easier for me to go. But they're playing their video games, and I'm saying, they're down by 10 at home. The Jayhawks will come back, and they never came back. They didn't. Right? I didn't have anything on that game, but they never came back. Baylor's defense is the truth, and they're amazing. They're undefeated in Big 12. They only have that 1 loss, and that was freaking way back before LSU beat Alabama in football. That was actually the day before LSU beat Alabama in football, and that's how long ago Baylor's loss was, my man. But I got to tell you, Kansas used to be that fade team on the road. They're not that this year, Kansas, they have a defense. They rank 10th on defense. Defensive efficiency, and I believe they rank first or second. I think it's first in offensive efficiency, and that's why they're right there, on KenPom as the number one team in the nation. And KenPom has Baylor number 2. Baylor ranks 23rd on offense, but 3rd on defense here. There's one thing that I found an angle here, and it's the home road splits, but it's kind of backwards. Baylor shoots better on the road than at home. They shoot 44.8% on the road, and at home they're only shooting 41.5%. Kansas, opposite as well. They shoot, not opposite, but it's about equal. They shoot on the road 47.3%. You expect that to drop off. I think their average is around 47, 48%. So it's kind of weird. They're a very good road team. And I think if they can shoot over 44% this game, they have a chance to win. And this game is going to be about one player, and that's Udoka Azubuike, that 7-foot player that seems to be playing for Kansas on his 6th year or something. The guy, I feel like he gets hurt every year, but he's not this year. But he's going to play a huge part of this game because that's where Baylor likes to score, is inside, and he's got to stay in the paint, and he's got to be blocking those shots. And I think if he does that and does not get in foul trouble, Kansas has the offensive power to possibly overtake Baylor here. So I actually do like the Jayhawks because of the home road splits and the matchups inside. I don't love it like the total. That could go any way for me. I think the Jayhawks getting a couple points here. We'll take them and for a couple stars. What are your thoughts on this one?
I wrote down Baylor 3.5 or 4, and that'll probably at least a half point, maybe a whole point, could be determined by the status of Maceo Teague, who has a wrist injury. Missed the Oklahoma game the other night and is currently questionable. He averages 14.4 points per game, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal. Baylor has been a single-digit favorite 11 times this year. They're 8-3 against the spread. Kansas has only been a dog once, winning outright, catching just 1 point at West Virginia. Had a 58-49 win, and like you said, they have not tasted defeat since that home loss to Baylor. They've won 11 in a row and 8-3 against the spread during that stretch. I can see Baylor losing this game. Probably be good for them if they lost this game, but they have been killing it lately, but so has KU. But I think based on home court advantage, Baylor will be at least 3, and I'm thinking probably 3.5 or 4. And I don't have a strong if Kansas were getting more than 5, I'd probably be interested in them. Mm-hmm. I don't think the number will get there. So we shall see.
Yeah, even with Teague out, I wouldn't think that it would get to 3 or 4. I could be wrong here. I guess we'll see if he's out, right? He missed the last 2, like you said. So I think that's an interesting part of the handicap here, And what side's the public going to be on here? Are they going to be on Kansas, or is Baylor going to be the public side? I don't know. I
don't know either. That's a tough read ahead of time. I have no idea because both of them are playing so well right now.
All right. Well, there you go. And like I said, I think Kansas is going to win the game, and so I kind of like them, but this is definitely not a big play. Brian's right about saying, if this thing was 5, it'd be a good play, but, this is...
These are just not 2 teams we're looking to fade right now.
Exactly. And we have to talk about the big games here. We don't talk about, a blind Christian facing,
That's right. Of course.
Belmont, or there's not, no, this is definitely the games that everyone's going to be keying on. And if there's ever value on it, I'd like to give away a free pick on it. And, the premium plays like last week didn't get there with West Virginia. And I'm glad I didn't play it because Baylor destroyed the shit out of them too. So sometimes the number's just not right. Well, we have a couple minutes here. Let's get into a quick Sunday game here. We're going to go back to Big Ten country. Maryland's going to be facing Ohio State. Ohio State's going to be laying about 3 points. The total in this game is at 131. And I'll start with this baby. Ohio State, they've actually been pretty good lately. Maryland, now that Penn State lost at home to Illinois, I got Maryland as the best team in the Big Ten as of at least right now, and that thing's kind of been changing a little bit during the year, as we all know. Michigan State had their lull pretty bad. This is going to depend a lot on tonight's game too, because I want to see how Ohio State plays against Iowa. Iowa's a fast-paced team, and if Ohio State wins this game, maybe they come back to and let down a little bit against Maryland. But Iowa's favored by 2.5 points or so. But one thing Iowa does is they run. They play fast, and Ohio State's going to be on much less rest than Maryland is. Maryland is going to be on about 4 extra full days of rest, and Ohio State will have 2 days of rest. So I think that's going to play a little bit into this handicap. If you look at the stats, I think Ohio State is still a little bit overrated. I think this is the Terps' year, and I think after this win, we'll kind of christen their mark on winning the Big Ten regular season here. If they're going to be a 3-point or better dog, then I'd say it's a play. But at 2 or 1, I don't think it is, and it'd be just a lean to Maryland. Any quick thoughts on it?
Well, just Maryland, playing so well. I mean, they haven't lost in more than a month. January 14th was their last L at Wisconsin. But when they have lost this year, it's been on the road. They've lost 4 road games to Penn State, Seton Hall, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Jalen Smith is really balling for Maryland right now. 9 straight double-doubles. Ohio State has righted the ship a little bit here recently, 5-1. Both straight up and against the spread after they really struggled for more than a month after beating Kentucky out in Vegas. I mean, they were really bad early in the Big Ten, but the schedule eased up a little bit for them, and they've come on of late. They've obviously got a very tough one in Iowa City, and then, like you mentioned, a pretty quick turnaround. I would think Ohio State would be a super-duper short favorite. But, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Maryland was -1 or it was a pick-em, depending on what kind of result we get from Ohio State and Iowa City tonight, which if C.J. Frederick gets upgraded to probable, he's a double-figure scorer for Iowa who's questionable and missed that comeback win over Minnesota at the Barn last Sunday. I might play Iowa tonight if he gets upgraded. But as for this one, without knowing Ohio State's result. And I also saw that I saw something on Twitter about Carton, the freshman guard who had left the team like a month ago. I saw something about he's back in school. Now, I don't know if that means he's going to start playing again or start playing right away, but that might be something to keep an eye on. I mean, he was averaging double figures and shooting 40% from 3 when he left the team, and I think it was January 20th was his last game playing. So, I mean, I don't have the full details on it. I just saw a tweet about it probably like 5 minutes before we started this show. So, but maybe just check that personnel-wise for the Buckeyes. But no strong opinion on it right here.
Yeah, definitely check DJ Carton. That's good information there. And also follow Brian Edwards. He's got all kinds of injury information, and not only college football, but also college basketball and NBA and everywhere. Brian, your account's a plethora of information, my man. And so love what you're getting. Love it when you get that info out, my man. And that's a great point because Carton was a really good player. Wasn't he, for Ohio State? So that could affect the line as well. Ken Pom has him as their second best. He's the second best player, and so Caleb Wesson first, DJ Carton second, Washington, Liddell, and C.J. Walker. So that's going to be interesting to see if he comes back. So that's going to affect it. Yeah. So right now, definitely a lean for me, and we'll go from there. Any final thoughts, my man?
Yeah, let me throw out just a couple of trends to keep an eye on. as long as the total for an LSU game is not north of 155, look to play the over. The over's on 11-3 run for LSU. They're at South Carolina on Saturday. South Carolina, they lost a close one in Starkville at the Hump last night, but they're still 8-3 straight up, 9-2 against the spread in its last 11. Mississippi State has seen 7 straight overs, and 9 of its last 10 have gone over. And just NBA-wise, I'll just tell you that I've been having a lot of success with Pelicans games over, Wizards games over, Hawks games over, and the Memphis Grizzlies have been real good to me on the sides lately. And what else? Anytime East Tennessee State's laying single digits, they're a team to look at. And LSU's struggling here down the stretch. If they're laying points at South Carolina, I would like the Gamecocks as a home dog on Saturday.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it looks like that it's going to be close to a pick'em here. So that might be a good home dog right there. And the total's probably going to be around 160, I would think, 159. So we'll see, man. They both lost their last game, so there might be fire in this game, you know. That's definitely one to look for. But
LSU just doesn't play. They play no defense. They're lazy on defense, and they're just super duper athletic in terms of getting to the rim offensively. And Skylar Mays is having a heck of a year. And look, the Kentucky LSU game, I think the halftime score was 29-28, and it still went over 150. I mean, they had more than 100 points in the second half. Now, part of that was time and score, and they were trying to rally and doing some fouling and some free throws, obviously, help that. But, you never know when time and score is going to dictate some wild circumstance in the last 2 or 3 minutes of maybe no points or like 30 of them if you get a foul fest. So, anything 155 or less, just in general, in any LSU game, and I don't care who the opponent is. They played Vandy. It was a 99-90 game. And Vandy games haven't been like that often. It's just LSU plays no D, and they're terrific offensively.
Absolutely, Brian. Well, thank you so much for that information. I'll be keying on that game as well, my man. Really appreciate you coming on, talking all these sports coming up here. Great job this year, obviously, in the NBA. And, hey, man, have a safe weekend. Enjoy the fights, and obviously enjoy the games.
Thanks, Kiev. I appreciate it. Let me encourage your listeners to also check out the Twitter account for Major Wager. The handle is @MajorWagerUno, UNO. And when I feel like I'm killing my Twitter followers with injury info, I just go over there and tweet it. So a lot of injury info and trends there. And my Twitter handle, again, is @VegasB. Edwards. Enjoyed it as always, Kiev, man. Have a great weekend. Good luck with your picks, and that goes for your listeners as well.
That was Brian Edwards from MajorWager.com and BrianEdwardsSports.com. Make sure you check him out. Everyone have a safe weekend. Have fun. Enjoy the games, and go get some winners.